I'm Sarah Fensky, and this is the 314. Every episode, we sit down with St. Louisans who know what makes this place tick. Together, we explore why things are the way they are and how we can make them better. This episode of the 314 podcast is sponsored by Cardinals Nation. The Gateway Arch Park Foundation is announcing some big news this week. The nonprofit has closed on the Millennium Hotel. The long vacant building was owned by a Singapore-based hospitality company, but it had become a gaping hole in the heart of downtown. Now it's in local hands, with an experienced developer on tap to begin its transformation. It's a big coup for the 16-year-old Gateway Arch Park Foundation, but the organization has even bigger plans in store, plans that could truly transform downtown. When Ryan McClure, executive director of the foundation, explained what he and his colleagues are now thinking about doing, I promise you, my heart skipped a beat. This idea is huge. Now, later in this episode, St. Louis Magazine senior editor Nicholas Phillips joins us to discuss his latest scoop on some real progress being made at the troubled St. Louis jail. But first, let's hear from the Gateway Arch Park Foundation's executive director on the really big things he's thinking about now. Ryan McClure, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Really great to be here.
So congratulations, you just bought a giant empty hotel.
Yes, we did. This has been a huge undertaking, and it's been, a little over a 3-year process from when we started thinking about this to talking to the ownership, beginning a dialogue there. To where we are today, which we have closed, we've taken possession, and we can start the future of this site, which is going to be transformational for downtown St. Louis. And we are very grateful that we're in a position to help with this, and that is solving a huge problem for downtown St. Louis and for our region.
So for people who aren't just on the edge of their seats over this project, and there's a lot of us who are just so excited about what the Cordish companies have planned for this. Yeah. Give us the overview. What's the vision for what's going to happen to this giant empty hotel?
Sure. So, first of all, we cannot imagine a better partner to embark on this journey with than Cordish companies. I mean, what they've done at Ballpark Village, Kansas City Power and Light, and then across the country, they've just been an incredible developer that shows remarkable success and progress. So what you'll see and what's in their plan currently, which can always change, but the meat and potatoes of it is you've got a 41-story residential tower. So
Wow.
Think of that on the southern side of it's really where the small tower of the Millennium is now. And then you'll have a Class A office building. You'll have an amphitheater. You'll have ground level retail. You'll have great public space. It's going to be much more connected to the Arch Grounds and to downtown than that site has been in the last 60 years.
And St. Louis can sustain this. I get nervous,
Yeah.
I see okay, there's this being built, there's that being built. Are there that many people that want to live downtown?
I mean, Cordish Companies has put this plan together based on what they know and what they've experienced will be successful. So you need look no farther than One Cardinal Way to know that a luxury high-rise apartment building can be successful downtown, and especially in that area of downtown. So One Cardinal Way is fully leased, and there's actually a waiting list for it. So they know that apartment tower can be successful. And then in addition to that, there is a lack of Class A office space in downtown St. Louis right now. I know, it's in the news. It's not a secret that there's a lot of office vacancy in downtown, but there is not a lot of Class A office space. And that's what companies are wanting right now.
They want amenities.
They want amenities. They want newer buildings or renovated buildings that have the amenities that create a great environment for working. So, those are the two core components, right? A Class A office space and a luxury tower. But having all this great retail space right next to the Arch and right next to Busch Stadium, and great public space and amphitheater, and then a winter garden that you can go to all throughout the year. I mean, these are things that can and will be successful downtown.
So I have to ask, you're the head of the Gateway Arch Park Foundation. And this is an organization that formed to do the City Arch River project that put a cap on downtown. It connected the arch to downtown.
Yeah.
It was transformational. I
Yeah.
love what you guys did.
Thank
But
you.
how did you go from that? You've got this very specific goal in mind, this very specific project, huge project that you
Yeah.
pull off. And then you say, okay, we're actually going to get into the game of purchasing this giant empty hotel.
Yeah.
We're almost going to become developers, even though I
Yeah.
know the Cordish company, very
Right.
experienced, going to be there. Did there have to be a hard conversation about what's our new mandate here?
Yeah. That's a great question. You're right. We were formed in 2009 really to help transform the experience at the Gateway Arch. And a big part of that was connecting the arch to downtown St. Louis by capping one block of the highway, which, if you think about it, the arch had been separated from the city that it undeniably represents from the moment it existed. So that had to be solved. And then renovating the museum and doing this large project that we did not do alone. I mean, this is one of the largest public-private partnerships that's ever existed in St. Louis. So when you're doing that, and then we transform into a conservancy that's going to support the park in perpetuity by continuing to raise funds for programming, conservation, capital projects. We started looking around the park and thinking about what's next, what needs to happen here to continue the momentum for this park and for downtown. We are incredibly fortunate to have a visionary board of trustees and donors who challenge us to have a really strong organization that operates well and in a fiscally responsible way, but they also challenge us to think big and dream big. That's how you get transformational things done. And so when we started talking about this with our board, there was never a moment where people were like, well, I don't know about this. It was keep going, keep asking questions, keep getting information, keep pushing. And that's what we did for 3 years. I mean, this took a lot of diligence on a lot of people's parts to get to this point. There are many times where it got really frustrating and we could have given up. But that's not what's going to move us forward. You have to be diligent, some would say stubborn, to get things like this done. So it made sense for us because it is right next to the park. It's in our mission to ensure that the Gateway Arch and its surroundings are vital and well supporting, and the Millennium is right there.
Do you feel like maybe there was a little bit of a leadership vacuum in terms of somebody who could step in and deal with this problem that everybody knew was a problem? Again, this giant empty hotel. Everybody was kind of looking around at each other like, well, maybe the city will do this. Maybe this entity will do this. It had to be somebody new who could come and expand their mandate.
I think what we had was actually a convergence of leaders and organizations coming to a convergence of that we all knew was there. So we couldn't have gotten to this point without the city of St. Louis, SLDC, our alder people, supporting us through this. This truly is a public-private partnership. It cannot be done by one organization. While we are purchasing it and we're taking the lead here on that, and then partnering with Cordish, it takes everybody working together. And I think that's a model that if St. Louis follows, we can do really amazing things. When St. Louis falls apart is when we work separately in silos. When we work together, amazing things happen. And the Millennium Hotel is a perfect example of that.
So something that felt like it was happening there maybe during the pandemic, right after the pandemic, is a lot of people who weren't spending much time downtown just completely gave up on downtown. You would see them on Facebook in the comments sections, thinking this had become this hellhole and we needed to just pull the plug on having any hope for it. You're a former communications director. You, I'm sure, think a lot about messaging. How important is that when you're dealing with projects downtown to sort of set these clear expectations, sort of say, here's the part we're dealing with,
right?
As opposed to letting people get overwhelmed by the mass of what might need to be done ultimately?
Yeah, I mean that's a really great question. It's very easy to get wrapped up in what you may see on social media about downtown. I'm never going downtown. I haven't been in years. Well, if you haven't been in years, then you don't know what's there.
You have no idea.
Yeah, you have no idea. And if you haven't been let's just talking about our world. If you haven't been to the Gateway Arch since 2018, you should probably go. And you should go to the old courthouse, which just reopened in May. Be proud of it. Embrace it. Why don't we start asking ourselves what we can do? What can I do to make things better? And I can tell you one thing you can do to make things better is come downtown. Come to any of the programming that Greater St. Louis Inc. or Gateway Arch Park Foundation does, whether that's Blues the Arch coming the second weekend of August.
Nice little plug
Yeah,
right there.
nice plug. Downtown summer nights. There are amazing things coming. They're happening downtown. I can tell you, we brought in 70,000 people to our programming last year, and it's growing every year. And it's showing that when you're doing really quality, safe programming, and by the way, we have never had a public safety issue at a single event that we've done in downtown St. Louis, people will come. So I would encourage people to come down and check it out. And let's think about St. Louis in this way. What can we do as citizens here to move our city and our region forward? What can we do to be part of that momentum in making our city the best that it can be?
And you guys are doing that. I mean, you're all in. You bought the hotel. The rest of us, you're saying the answer really is as simple as we get to go hang out downtown, eat, drink, have a good time.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, come to the restaurants, support the businesses that are downtown. Come and check it out. I mean, really, I think it's no secret. I mean, we tend to have an inferiority complex in St. Louis, where we're very down on ourselves. And if we flip that on its head, we celebrate all that we have going for us in this city, which is a lot. Celebrate those things, admit that we've got challenges, because we do. There's no denying that. But we can both celebrate what we've got going for us and work on our challenges at the same time.
My guest today is Ryan McClure. He's the executive director of the Gateway Arch Park Foundation. And in just a minute, we'll get back to our conversation. We're going to talk about what's going to happen next year. But first, we have a word from our sponsor. Enjoy game day at Cardinal Nation Restaurant and Bar. That's just steps away from baseball heaven. With a sports-inspired menu and atmosphere designed for baseball fans near and far, it's a grand slam experience. From local favorites to innovative creations, everything that comes out of the kitchen is guaranteed to satisfy any major league appetite. Visit cardinalsnation.com to make your reservation. And now back to our conversation with Ryan McClure. Ryan, we're talking about, sort of next steps for the foundation that you run. And you've got a big project ahead of you with the Millennium Hotel. But you also mentioned, City Arch River, the goal was to cap a block of the highway.
Yeah.
You guys did that, but it's one block. We still have this big old highway that is cutting through downtown, cutting it off in most places from the river and from some cool parts of it. There's been a movement in a lot of U.S. cities to remove these highways. I was just dazzled by what they did in San Francisco.
Yeah.
They got rid of this earthquake-damaged highway. You now have the Embarcadero. The ferry building is right there. Kind of almost makes you think of St. Louis when you look at how that worked there. But it's not just West Coast cities. They're doing this in Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that's on your mind?
Absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, so the goal of City Arch River was to physically connect the arch, right? And what we did with the Park Over the Highway has absolutely done that, and it's paid dividends. Since the City Arch River is completed, we've got $571 million in economic impact that's happening every year on an annual basis. That's based on our study of last year. But we can do more. And as you mentioned, cities across America are dealing with the same things that we are with the I-44 corridor right next to Gateway Arch National Park, where highways that were built in the 1950s and 1960s separate parts of communities from themselves. And often they're separating them from waterfront assets.
It's just horrible.
Yeah,
it happened in that era. Like, what were they thinking?
I'm sure it seemed like a good idea at the time. But there are cities across America, and we're doing it. We've done it, some of it so far they're healing the wounds of those urban planning decisions from the 50s and 60s. You mentioned San Francisco, which coincidentally is also right next to a national park site with Golden Gate Recreation Area and the tunnel tops there. Kansas City is working on this right now, connecting two areas between in downtown next to Power and Light District. We have an opportunity, I think, along the I-44 corridor to really rethink what's happening there. When you have a $670 million development in the Millennium Hotel happening, you have these great plans for Gateway South, Shoto's Landing. The Mansion House is there's momentum there. There's momentum on Laclede's Landing. There's the recent renovations at the convention center. All of that is right along the I-44 corridor, where you have an elevated highway that goes to at grade, then goes subterranean, back to grade and elevated. We have a lot of things that separate us from the riverfront. So in the not too distant future, there's going to have to be improvements that are made to the Poplar Street Bridge. What opportunities does that create? So this is an opportunity right now to start working with private developers, nonprofits like ours, civic leadership organizations like Greater St. Louis Inc. and MoDOT together. And look, working with MoDOT for us has been an amazing experience. They have been great. We would not have the park over the highway without MoDOT.
Wow.
That is the first land bridge of its kind in the state of Missouri. So again, St. Louis did something really unique, imaginative, and courageous. We can keep doing that. Our agency, our organization is committed to continuing to think big about things like that transform downtown, connect us to our urban national park, which is one of the few urban national parks in America, and reconnect us to the Mississippi River, which is the entire reason that this city is here.
So you guys raised $221 million in private funds to pull off the City Arch River project. There was also an infusion of federal funds that helped with that. That's a lot of money. That's just for one block. Is there an appetite amongst your board and amongst the people in town who have the power to make things happen for this kind of financial commitment that we might be talking about to remove a whole highway?
Yeah, well, and just to clarify, the $380 million City Arch River project, which of 221 of that was private money, which, by the way, largest private investment in a national park in the history of the country.
That's huge.
Never seen that amount in a national park project. It happened right here in St. Louis. But that was for the entire project. That expanded the visitor center. It redid the museum. It redid the riverfront. When you think about the section of covering the highway, you're really talking about, $15 to $20 million that was just for that piece.
So that's not nearly as scary. This is not impossible.
It is not impossible. And that's the key point right there. These things are not impossible. They're hard. They can be daunting. But with perseverance and collaboration, working together, they can be done. We've already proven that together as a community that we can do big things when we work together. So if we can do this full-scale renovation through public-private partnership of a national park in downtown St. Louis and connecting everything, that frankly is a model for other partnerships across the country. People are looking at us as a city. We can do this too. And I'm really encouraged by the conversations that we're starting to have about the highway and things that can happen there. I really think there's a possibility there. And again, our organization is committed to working on things like that.
So this conversation is starting to happen. Like my journalistic radar is kind of tickling a little bit here.
Yeah.
Do you see this as something where the Gateway Arch Park Foundation would take a lead role the way you did in City Arch River?
I think that remains to be seen. I think what the most important thing is just that we're working together hand in hand with organizations that need to be part of this. So that's Greater St. Louis Inc., that's MoDOT, that's the City of St. Louis, and it includes our partners in Illinois in St. Clair County, ensuring that this is a regional approach, right? Everything needs to be done thinking through a lens of regionalism. What is good for downtown is good for the region, for the downtown is undeniably the economic engine of St. Louis. So, but if we're going to make changes to the highway system, and there's a lot to be figured out there, I don't even know, I can't tell you exactly what the change would be because that's not my area of expertise. But we are committed to working with all of the organizations that need to be part of this. And whether we're taking the lead or somebody else is taking the lead, that's not necessarily the important thing. It's just that we're doing it together.
So you have a lot on your plate right now. You just closed on this hotel. Do we have any sense of what the timing of that project is going to be?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking, at a year and a half process to clear the site for development, and then working with Cordish. Hopefully, you're seeing shovels in the ground and in early 2027.
Wow. So that's
You know,
going to happen pretty soon.
yeah, it's not far off. It'll take a while to clear the site just because it's 4 acres, 500,000 square feet of property that needs to be abated and cleared. So it will take a while, but what I want to make sure that St. Louis is seeing is progress. It may take a while, but things need to keep moving. And that's what we're here to do is, continuing to keep things moving. And to think, I mean, we just went under contract on this property in September. That's not that long ago. Especially after 3 years of behind the scenes things that people weren't seeing. So there's a lot of behind the scenes things that happen every single day. I can guarantee you that people aren't seeing that are moving this forward. So what I can tell you is we're going to keep making progress and going along all of the steps that need to happen to make this project a reality.
So again, a lot going on right now for you and your organization. And then on a more personal note, you were recently selected as an Eisenhower Fellow. And basically, from what I can tell reading about this means you get to go to Europe and just learn from like some really smart people there.
Yeah.
What is it that you're hoping to take away from this experience?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly grateful to be part of this program. It is truly an honor. I'm both proud and humble at the same time about it. But it is an amazing program, based on President Eisenhower's desire for the world to have a more prosperous, peaceful, and just world, coming out of the experiences of World War II. And, we have so much to learn from each other as a global society, that I'm really excited to be and really honored to be part of. And St. Louis has had a great track record of Eisenhower Fellows, which I'm grateful to be part of that group.
But what's crazy is
yeah.
there's two of you this very year.
Yeah.
Not just are there two people from St. Louis, there's like two people from your neighborhood.
That's right. I am honored to be part of this cohort with Alderwoman Daniela Velasquez. It is awesome to be part of this in general, but really cool to be part of it with her. We are from the same neighborhood. She is my Alderwoman. And represents us in the board of aldermen so incredibly well. So I'm excited to see what both she and I bring back from this program to St. Louis, and I'm sure there will be things that we're working on together. So it's just really exciting. I'm honored to be part of it, and grateful to be chosen for this.
So I can't help but ask, because I'm so excited about this idea of removing this highway. Like, do you think when you're over there, you're going to be in Germany and in France, you're going to be looking at, wow, they've got some really cool downtowns that don't have highways in the middle of them.
I know we're just going to see so many things that we can take from this experience that we can bring back to St. Louis, and that's what it's all about. How do we learn from other communities to make our community better? And I don't know what's going to come of it, but I know we're going to study some public-private partnerships that are in those countries. Some of them have to do with infrastructure reuse, right? And that's what we're talking about is how do we take the infrastructure elements that we have, reuse them, adapt them to connect our communities, make them more walkable, make them safer, and make them more economically viable. There's a lot of examples of that in Germany, whether it's like turning. I know one of the places I put in my project was an old airfield that's been turned into an urban park. I mean, that's great. That's cool. And then, one of the largest public-private partnerships that's happened in Hamburg. So, yeah, we're definitely going to get some ideas, and we're going to bring them back and see how we can implement them in St. Louis.
Well, Ryan McClure, I can't wait to hear more about what you learn. I can't wait to see how all of this is going to unfold. It's going to be an exciting couple of years here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you for what you're doing with this podcast. It is really an honor to be part of this.
Ryan is the executive director of the Gateway Arch Park Foundation. In just a moment, we'll hear from St. Louis Magazine senior editor Nicholas Phillips. He'll tell us about the innovative new program debuting at the St. Louis City Justice Center. First, though, a word from our sponsor. This episode of the 314 podcast is supported by Anheuser-Busch Brewery Tours and Experiences. St. Louis beer lovers, your next culinary experience is right in your backyard at the Anheuser-Busch Brewery and Tour Center. Anheuser-Busch is hosting its next food and beverage pairing dinner at the Beer Garden on Thursday, July 17th. Hosted by its head chef and its resident cicerone, your palate will take a journey through a 4-course meal perfectly complemented with 4 of our carefully selected brand beverages. July's dinner theme is the All-Star Menu, its most requested pairings at the Budweiser Beer Garden. Reserve your seat today. Seating is running out. Visit BudweiserTours.com for tickets. And now for the closer. In recent years, the St. Louis City Justice Center has been marked by turmoil and trouble. But after then-Mayor Tashara Jones parted ways with a controversial jail commissioner, she brought in an experienced hand eager to probe the jail's problems and fix them. Doug Burris previously ran the St. Louis County Jail and the Federal Probation Office downtown. Now, as interim jail commissioner, he's made some changes. And the new idea he's pioneering might be his most ambitious yet. It requires buy-in from the jail's detainees. Senior editor Nicholas Phillips broke that story last week at stlmag.com, and he joins us now. Nick, welcome.
Thank you.
So interim jail commissioner Doug Burris, he's trying to set up an honor dorm within the city jail. What is an honor dorm?
It's a pod of 50 to 60 male residents or detainees, as they're called, who are getting extra privileges in exchange for good behavior. So good behavior here is, they're respecting the rules, they're respecting the staff and one another, right? The privileges they're getting are things like extra rec time, longer TV hours. They got a second microwave. And Burris is also looking at the budget to see whether he can do some of their other requests, like he's trying to get them extra computer tablets because there had been some fights over those, chessboards, barber's equipment, and maybe even a library if he can get that together. But, that little list depends on budget and safety.
So this all sounds pretty cool, at least from a detainee end. You were there as he unveiled this. What kind of reaction did he get?
He got a reaction that I think that they understood it as a concept, but there was a little bit of skepticism. And you have to understand the context here. I mean, when he told me that when he arrived in January to start working there, he sensed hatred toward the staff. That was the word that he used.
People were so fed up.
They were so fed up. And so apparently that had been because the staff had been using all sticks and no carrots. So Burris is here. He comes in and he's trying to introduce more carrots. The big one is this honor dorm. And he explains it to these guys by saying, look, we are doing this because we think that you can pull it off. We believe in you. And I remember one guy up in the mezzanines just stared down at him and said, all y'all believe in us. He was. So I think there was a lingering skepticism toward this.
They had not been feeling that anybody believed in them. But Burris, as you wrote in this story, he has made some big changes in the short time that he's been the interim commissioner. You wrote that he brought in job training, therapy for veterans. He helped them get extra library books. This is all before starting this honor dorm. Did that help buy him some goodwill where they understand this is a guy who's kind of advocating for them?
Oh, I think it did. And the evidence for that is that evidently a lot of them want to communicate with him directly, which
that makes your job hard.
Well, and so, but to me, that means that they see him as someone who could be willing to help them with whatever problem they have. But regardless, it's empirically true that he is writing letters on behalf of upstanding detainees to judges. And that's really huge for these guys because that means that if they are convicted, then that letter of Doug Burris putting in a good word for them might reduce their sentence.
Get them some leniency there.
And they know that he's doing this and he's doing it. And so I think I think those things have brought goodwill.
So this honor dorm has been up and running now for a few weeks. You were there last week. How are things going?
He's happy with it. There's been a couple of problems. One is that the guys had asked for cleaning supplies, but some of them plucked straws out of a broom, dipped it in some kind of cleaning agent with ammonium or something, and put that in the microwave until it caught fire and then smoked it.
People just want to get high.
Yes, they do. And so that was one problem. A second problem has been bullying. And Burris didn't really go into this in detail, so I don't know whether it was, whether it was physical, verbal, I don't know. But evidently there are guys in the honor dorm don't want the privileges to get yanked away, and so they're enforcing good behavior with kind of a heavy hand.
They're becoming almost the corrections officer there
Right.
within this. Okay. Yeah. So a few hiccups, but overall you said he's feeling good about this.
Overall, he's feeling good about it, yes.
So this jail has had some real problems. And I do want to mention, this is something that's very important to me, that a lot of people in this jail and in jails across the U.S., they are there. They have not yet been convicted of a crime. These are people who are waiting for their day in court. I think you said about 50% in the case of this jail. That's their status.
Well, no, I'd say most of them are awaiting either a trial or they're going to plea.
Okay.
They're going to plea.
So, yeah, these are people who have not yet been convicted, and yet this jail has had some real problems. You have had broken locks. You've had even some cases of rioting. Is there a fear that he could give people more freedom only to have to crack down even harder if they abuse it?
Well, I don't think that there is a security risk with these privileges. The fact that the jail administrators are using more cares doesn't mean they no longer have sticks.
Yes.
I don't think these privileges are going to enable a riot. It might just be that they don't really succeed in inducing good behavior. And that's if there's a fear, I think it might be that it's just not going to work.
Yeah. So what's the hope? What's the best case scenario here with this honor dorm?
Well, I think you have to look in contrast to the vicious cycle that used to be there. You had staff sort of treating harshly the detainees acting up. Then staff don't want to work there because it's an unpleasant place to work. And then fewer staff means that the detainees have to spend a longer time in their cells, so they get angrier, and it just feeds itself, right? In contrast to that, the hope is that this will become a virtuous cycle wherein not only does it go well in the pod, but then you have people wanting to transfer into it. You have detainees wanting to create their own honor dorm, and that is evidently what is happening.
People are already saying, we want an honor dorm on our floor.
4D. So the honor dorm right now is in 5D, but in 4D, from what I understand, they are trying to keep their incidence down to become the next honor dorm. And so if that's true, that would be a sign that this virtuous cycle that Burris is looking for is actually happening.
So we could use more virtuous cycles in St. Louis. I'm rooting for this one. Senior editor Nicholas Phillips, thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome.
I'm Sarah Fensky. That's the 314 for today. You can find out more in our podcast show notes and at stlmag.com. You can also find me every day in your inbox. That's thanks to St. Louis Magazine's fantastic free newsletter, St. Louis Daily. It's a fresh take on St. Louis with insight and original reporting, stories just like the one that Nick is just discussing. Sign up at stlmag.com/newsletters. The 314 is a production of St. Louis Magazine. I'm Sarah Fensky, and this is The 314. See you next time.